So, eliciting health state preferences. Whatever health state descriptive system we use, the next step is to get some scores, some numbers attaching to the different health states. There are a range of methods available, but far and away the most widely used is something called the time trade-off method. And in the time trade-off, this is an illustration for a chronic health state. The approach for temporary health states is slightly different, but let's focus on this. An individual is offered two alternatives. In the first alternative, they're going to live for some period of years, T years, usually 10 is used. Live for 10 years, and then they're going to die. In the second alternative, the individual is going to live for some number, X years, in full health, and then they're going to die. And so the individual respondent is asked to choose between these two alternatives. But it's not just a case of choosing one alternative over the other. What the elicitation process is trying to do is find out what value of X, what period of time in full health would leave the respondent balanced between having 10 years of ill health or a shorter time of full health. And there's different ways of asking the question, but essentially you're trying to get to that point where the individual says, I really can't choose. They're the same for me. This shorter period in full health is the same to me is as attractive or unattractive as this 10-year period in the ill health state. And so the score that's then attached to the ill health state is X over T. We'll see why that is in a minute. So essentially, you're asking the individual, what's the maximum number of years of life you would be willing to give up in order to enjoy full health, rather than your current ill health? Because that question identifies the T minus X, then you can get the X. Please.
You do that in a real interview,
yes,
face to face.
Most of the initial studies were done by interview face to face. Latterly, using computers, you're essentially being interviewed by the computer.
Right, and then when you do that, and when you say you vary, how in concrete terms do you do that? You ask, for example, you start with 5 years, and then if they say...
Quite a common approach is what's been called a ping pong approach, where you offer a sort of quite a high value of X to start with, and if the individual rejects that or says, well, that's better than or accepts it, it's much better than the 10 years of ill health, you then offer them a lower value. And then they quite possibly reject the lower value, so you offer them a somewhat higher, and the ping pong is the back and forward.
Yeah, but then I suppose that the respondent's response would be different depending on which value you start with.
Yes, there's some evidence of that, starting point bias. And I think with all these things, there's no perfect way to ask the question. If you are concerned about starting point bias, you can, of course, then ultimately model the responses and put in as a covariate what your starting point was. So you can then standardize to control for it.
We're doing this not for an individual's health choices, but to gather data about thousands of people in Oxfordshire or in some location to get a policy base.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so it's typically for the individual, it's a hypothetical health state. The individual's not actually in this health state. They're given a description, such as our 21112 health state. They're asked to consider what it would be like to be in that health state for the next 10 years.
Sure, but then if you ask the same way to 1,000 people, that would bias only those 1,000 people. you have to vary those ways of asking across those 1,000 people, then I would say that the starting point bias would not operate.
Good point. Right.
Yes. So as I say, you could, if you vary the starting point, you could then control for it.
Right.
But if you just start somewhere and don't vary it, you've no idea the extent of it.
Yes, so my question is, do people do that?
There's been quite a wide range of different approaches. I couldn't characterize them all. As we'll see, it's been done in about 25 countries, and the design has varied in different ways over time in different countries. So there'll be some that have and some that definitely haven't.
Sorry for that, because what you described there is something I can read in books, but I'd like to ask you a specific question that I can only ask.
That's absolutely fine.
So let's say, when you interview someone and you want to get the responses, you say that, let's suppose you are fine with all those 5 domains, except for mobility, where you have some problems in walking about.
Yeah.
And let's assume you are going to live with this problem in the mobility, some problem in the mobility for 10 years. And would you like to trade that life for life in full health for 5 years? And then he says, oh no, I'd like to certainly live for 10 years with some problem in mobility. Mm-hmm. Then you would say, how about, let's say, 7.5 years or whatever.
Exactly.
So
that's what you do.
You want to go a little bit too far, then how about living for 9 years in full mobility in exchange for with some problem in mobility for 10 years? Oh, well then I would like to say I prefer 9 years in full health. And then you go back to, let's say, how about then 8 years or 7 years?
Exactly what happens, yes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. And hence the ping pong description, you're back and forward. Now, of course, that approach, which is really intuitively reasonable, has problems. Starting point bias, one issue. Also, if you don't start near the answer, it could be quite a long process. And so there's more opportunity for individuals to get fatigued or bored and disinterested. So there's issues definitely around this.
And then you also say that there are so many combinations of health status.
Yeah.
And so in this case, I only asked the person to suppose that you have one problem area where you have moderate difficulty. But there are some combinations where you have some problem in mobility, no problem in self-care, but severe problem in usual activities and severe problem in anxiety and depression. And then let's suppose you're going to live in that status for 10 years, and would you like to trade off that 10 years for living in full health, say, for 5 years or something like that? Is that how you proceed?
Yeah.
Wow, so it's going to be a little bit, you demand a lot of imagination for people to imagine.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
The alternative, of course, is you go to experts who are experts in imagination, or experts, doctors perhaps, because they've seen it all. But who cares about their preferences? Well, they care about their own preferences, but why should the rest of us have a system based on their preferences?
Because we are interested only in the population average. You don't have to ask 10 questions of one person. You can ask only 3 questions of a person.
We'll come to that in a minute, and generally people have asked a lot of questions. Graphically, if it helps, and again it may help some people, not others, along here we're measuring time, up here we're measuring the score we're attaching to the health state. So the 2 alternatives might be, alternative 1, it's some level of ill health, 10 years, or full health for a shorter period. And as I say, the process is to try and find that X, move the X about until the individual is indifferent between the 2 options. Or same graph, essentially we're, in QALY terms, the QALYs that health state A produce are W times 10. That's how many QALYs being in health state A would produce. And being in full health is going to produce 1 times X, 1 because we give a 1 to full health, X, because that's the period of full health, plus 0 times 10 minus X, 0, because we assume death scores as 0. Rearrange these and you get W is X over 10. And so that's where the number comes from. The intuition is this: if you regard the health state as very bad, you'll be willing to give up more years of life. If you think the health state is not so bad, you might only be willing to give up a few months. And so that's going to affect the X, and it's going to therefore affect the score W.